Are we live? Yep, there we go. We're live. We're just waiting for committee to start up. So while we're waiting, it should be any minute now. Pierre just spoke in the House requesting an emergency debate.
Thank you very much, and thank my honourable colleague, the Leader of the NDP, for raising this issue as well. I rise today to discuss the emergency in the lives of 3,000 Brampton area families who got the news that one day after the Prime Minister's meeting with the President of the United States that their factory would be moving to the U.S. For these families, it is not just an emergency, it is a tragedy. They ask how they are going to pay their bills, feed their families, whether they might have to uproot their kids from their schools and hockey teams to move to a faraway place just to put food on the table, Mr. Speaker. This is part of a larger trend. 100,000 more people are unemployed since when this Prime Minister took office, promising to protect jobs. $54 billion of net investment has fled since he was elected, promising to bring investment back to this country. And our economy is the fastest shrinking in the G7. These statistics might seem like they're just interesting to the economists and the accountants, but Mr. Speaker, in fact, they are human lives that are at stake. This is particularly important to Canadian taxpayers, but because the federal government has contributed $15 billion tax dollars to the company that's now moving these jobs, that works out to almost $1,000 for every single family in Canada. Families that cannot afford groceries or homes are paying to subsidize the export of our jobs to the United States of America. In the past, this House has granted, and the prior Speaker has granted, emergency debates on the Oshawa GM plant back in 2018. That was the 2,500 jobs that were at risk at that time. Now we have an even bigger number as part of a larger phenomenon, and therefore I ask that you acknowledge the emergency in the lives of these 3,000 auto workers and so many like them across this country by granting an emergency debate. Thank you.
I thank the honourable members for their interventions. However, I'm not satisfied that the request meets the requirements of the standing orders at this time.
What?
That being said,
How?
I know that this is a topic of great interest to many members. I want to assure the House that I'm open to reconsidering the request at a later date if the situation warrants. Je désire informer la Chambre.
I wish to inform the House that the volume of the earpieces will now be reset.
Orders of the day.
Orders of the day, ordre du jour, ordre émanant du gouvernement.
Government orders, government business, government bills, Commons resuming debate at second reading of Bill C-12, an act respecting certain measures relating to the security of Canada's borders.
Honourable member for Calgary-Nose Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada's asylum system is deeply and fundamentally broken after 10 years of Liberal government. This was not the case 10 years ago, but today Canada's once compassionate asylum claim system has been absolutely ruined and absolutely abused and absolutely made a mess of by this Liberal government. So today I rise to speak to Bill C-12. I will direct my comments to parts 5, 6, 7, and 8 of the bill, which amend the Department of Citizenship and Immigration Act, as well as the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. These parts are similar to the immigration provisions contained in Bill C-2. A decade ago, Canada's asylum claim backlog sat at less than 10,000 cases. Today,
Okay, I hate to interrupt Michelle Rumpel-Garner because she's a great MP, but we are switching over to committee. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. Any minute now, they should be starting. I thought they've already started. I mean, that's what it says on the House comments. There they go.
Calling the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 7 of the Standing Committee on Canadian Heritage. pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 22nd, the committee is meeting for its study of CBC Radio-Canada priorities. And we have with us today from the CBC Radio-Canada, Madame Marie-Philippe Bouchard, President and Chief Executive Officer of the CBC Radio-Canada. Thank you for being with us today. Ma'am, we are getting started about 10 minutes late because we had a vote in the House of Commons. I'm not sure if your schedule permits, but we'd love to have you stay for the extra 10 minutes afterwards. Thank you very much. And with that, I think we are ready to get started. With you have 5 minutes, Madame, to give us some opening remarks.
There we go. Madam Chair, members, I welcome the opportunity to meet with you again, this time as President and CEO of CBC Radio-Canada. It has been a busy 11 months. Quand nous nous sommes rencontrés la dernière fois,
when I last met with you, I said CBC Radio-Canada needed to be a listening organization, that I wanted to take the time to listen to employees, to stakeholders, and to Canadians, the users and the non-users of our services. That's what I have been doing across the country. What I've heard is reflected in the new strategic plan. We'll be sharing that with Canadians at our annual public meeting on October 28th. But I think it would be helpful to share the details with you today. We all know the challenges facing Canadians today. Economic and trade pressures, the hollowing out of local news by global digital platforms that now capture 92% of digital ad revenue in Canada. That revenue that once sustained a diverse news ecosystem of community newspapers, radio, even television all across the country. The continued rise of polarization and the difficulty in knowing what information is accurate. What I've heard is that a public broadcaster serving all Canadians with relevant and reliable news and supporting Canadian culture is more important than ever. But people expect more from us. In this environment, CBC Radio-Canada should be a national public service helping to bring Canadians together, supporting democracy and the media ecosystem. To support this public service role, our strategic plan has 3 pillars: proximity, digital agility, and bringing people together. The first pillar, proximity, means increasing our connections by being present in more communities and offering content that is trusted and also engages those who currently may not use or value what we offer. We also need to be a better collaborator with private and community media to help support a healthy media ecosystem. With our second pillar, digital agility, we mean ensuring that our content is easily available on whatever digital platforms Canadians are using, and using technologies like artificial intelligence for the public good. Our last pillar is bringing people together. That means finding ways to build understanding by creating opportunities for shared Canadian experiences.
building on a very strong foundation. Our extensive network of journalists spanning 90 locations from west to east and across the north, and in 7 foreign bureaus, providing news and information trusted by Canadians. Our commitment to homegrown stories as the largest single investor supporting the creation of original content by Canadian independent producers, the most popular radio shows and podcasts in the country, and digital services used by 20 million Canadians each month. This year, we've been able to add journalists to over 20 communities in every region of the country, providing a local service to communities who have never had a local CBC or Radio-Canada service, and sharing their perspectives with the country. Through our CoLab program, we are partnering with local public libraries in more than 250 communities. There, we're offering programs tailored to what the community wants from us. Sometimes it's workshops on video production or how to make a podcast. Sometimes it's sessions on spotting fake news or recording television or radio programs with a community audience. That's also proximity. Finally, we'll keep listening to Canadians. We'll listen and we'll adapt. so that we can increase the public value created for their benefit. Thank you for your time.
Less than 5 minutes even. Thank you very much. We'll start with questioning now from Mrs. Thomas with the Conservatives.
Sure. Thank you. Ms. Bouchard, Travis Danraj, I'm sure you're familiar with him, of course. He worked for the CBC. He was the host of the show Canada Tonight. He aimed to give multiple voices and different perspectives an opportunity to share on his show. But unfortunately, due to the culture that was created within CBC's workplace, he was forced to resign. And in his resignation letter, he described CBC's workplace as facilitating a culture of, quote, retaliation, exclusion, and psychological harm, end quote. How do you respond to these allegations?
Well, as you know, Mr. Danraj has filed a complaint to the Human Rights Tribunal. So unfortunately, I'm limited in the comments that I can make because we're going to hear the evidence at that tribunal.
I'll just set the record straight right here. At this committee, you do have the ability to be open and honest here, and everything that you say here, of course, is kept in confidence and it's not usable in court. So I'd be curious as to how you would respond to that.
Well, this is not my interpretation of my responsibility. We are in a court litigation or a quasi-judicial tribunal litigation. With respect to that process, I will reserve my comments.
Is it true that there's a culture of toxicity at the CBC?
That's not what I've experienced. Now, you may know that I've worked with the CBC prior to coming back as the CEO. I worked there for almost 30 years. I've been away for 10 years. And since I've been back, I've been traveling and meeting with a lot of our employees and a lot of stakeholders. I've not witnessed what you describe as a culture of toxicity.
Those were the words of a former employee, actually. Those are Travis Danraj's words, not my own. He would speak from his experience there. Now, I'm curious, have you looked into his case at all since becoming CEO? You've had 11 months to do so.
Again, I cannot comment on his specific case.
I'm not asking you to comment on the specific case. I'm just simply asking you, have you looked into it? Have you looked into his complaints, his concerns?
There are people in the organization that are charged with doing that, and okay, I trust that they have.
So as CEO, you have not, but you have simply allowed others to do that work for you.
Well, as is natural in a large organization, I don't actually double up on everybody's responsibility.
Okay. Ms. Bouchard, as is natural in any organization, the buck stops with the CEO, the person at the top. They are the person responsible for cultural formation. And the culture at the CBC, according to Mr. Danraj, is one of toxicity. It's one where there is retaliation, exclusion, and psychological harm being done to employees. You're telling me that that doesn't concern you enough to dig into that on your own. You're telling me that you've simply stepped aside and allowed others to deal with that.
I would tell you that we conduct surveys on a regular basis of the work culture, the employee's perception. So one individual's claims does not make a whole organization's culture. What I have as evidence, first of all, is my own experience in the organization in the last 10 months, but also the responses to surveys that we conduct regularly with our employees that describe their sense of pride and their sense of fairness in the organization. And those surveys show that the sentiment is widely positive.
Those surveys are anonymous?
Yes, they are.
Excellent. In a leaked phone call that Mr. Danraj, he asked the CBC management, quote, why can't they, the CBC, get interviews with Conservatives? And the CBC management replied back vaguely saying, quote, well, you know why. So I'm curious, in your estimation, why are Conservatives not welcome at the CBC?
Well, I would say Conservatives are quite welcome at the CBC. In fact, they are interviewed regularly.
Give me an example of the last 5 Conservatives that were interviewed on the show within the last 2 weeks.
I don't know.
Anywhere within the CBC?
I can't answer that. I can get back to you and give you more detail, but I don't watch and listen to everything we broadcast on a continuous basis. So if you would like, I will provide those numbers.
Which show offered by the CBC do you think is most fair, offers the most diverse views in terms of news coverage?
Well, all of our shows are, especially in the news area, are governed by the same journalistic standards and practices. So I would say...
Some are equally diverse?
I would say they were all striving to achieve the proper balance in terms of subject matters, interviewees, and diversity of points of view.
So there would be no bias at the CBC?
Well, I would say that that's not our policy, that's not our practice. I'm not oblivious to the fact that some people claim there is bias, but that's not how we work.
Your perception. What's your perception? You're the head of the organization. What's your perception?
My perception is that we are working very hard to try and bring accurate, factual-based news and information to Canadians every day.
So no bias at the CBC according to you?
No bias according to me.
Okay, interesting.
Thank you. Prochainement, je donne la parole.
Next, I'll give the floor to Mr. Tumba for 6 minutes. Hello, Ms. Bouchard. How are you? I'm great. Well, I'll back up just a little bit. In 2 minutes, you can tell me how you view the role of CBC Radio Canada in this age of disinformation and in this digital age. Well, I feel that as a public service, we have a very important role to play. We have been contributing to the transformation of the relationship between Canadians and their public broadcaster. And it's been decades. We've been going from the analog to the digital age. We are pioneers in this field. We continue to be pioneers. This is very important because Canadians are increasingly exposed to a variety of rather international sources. The amount of Canadian news that Canadians get has been decreasing since Canadian news sources have been increasingly blocked on various sites. So we have to make sure we can be discovered by Canadians, both in French and in English, and in 8 Indigenous languages also. That's our mission. We are also working very closely with international partners and other stakeholders to develop practices that allow and that promote a more civilized discourse. We have seen a certain polarization where the extremes are pushed by algorithms and there is less space for open dialogue where common understanding is promoted. Our services are there for all of those who want to use them, media editors and all others. What we want to see is a civilized and civic discourse around the news. And that's a job that is important for public broadcasters. And it creates public value. Well, speaking of these efforts, how can CBC Radio-Canada better meet the needs of the peoples on the South Shore of Montreal, for example, in my riding? Well, the Francophone content is something we've been doing for a very long time. As you know, we have close ties with Francophone communities, both in large urban centres and in the regions outside Montreal, and, of course, throughout the country, in all communities where Francophones are present. Now, we're doing that through not just our traditional stations, but also through digital tools that allows us to be quite hyper-local and create info letters, for example, that are very localized, and also vertical videos, for example, that can be used and discovered easily. That allows communities to see themselves reflected on streaming, for example, and not only at fixed specific hours, so that allows relationships to build. And by having journalists on the ground, it allows people and communities to express themselves and to be seen, not just in their own area, but throughout the country. Outside the regions, maybe let's look at diversity then. I often hear and I see on the screens various things. Could you tell us about CBC Radio-Canada's current objectives in terms of diversity, equality, and integration, both what we see on screen and within the organization internally, recruitment, retention, and building talent of underrepresented groups? Before I arrived, the organization had already put in place a plan to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion. And we have results also that show that. But in our new strategic plans, we are strengthening our commitment to reflecting Canada as it is today, with the diversity of communities that make it up. We know the importance not just of seeing that reflected in our team and on our teams, but also on the screens. We work closely with organizations such as the Indigenous Screen Office, the Black Screen Office, and we also work with groups that help us develop, and fill boards rather, and we also work with groups that help us develop ways to connect with these groups, to work on projects in terms of hiring and promoting people of diverse backgrounds internally. We have programs for that. And we want to help people overcome any challenges and systemic challenges that might be in the way, so that they can reach various positions or develop their skills in various areas. So we do pay specific attention to reach these goals. Thank you very much. Next, I'll give the floor to Mr. Champoux for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Hello, Madam Chair, Madam President. It's great to have you here with us today and to hear about your work, because I know that you've been very busy since during the 11 months since you were appointed, but I know there's a lot of planning you do for the next years also. You published recently a 5-year plan for your strategic planning. Before getting into the specific points of your strategic plan, and I'd like to hear how these discussions went. I'm looking specifically at information. So right now, we are at a time where there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation in our news, alternative facts, reality that's just twisted, and that is a huge challenge for journalists. But you, as a public broadcaster, need to ensure that you have information that is neutral, as objective as possible, as factual as possible. How do CBC Radio-Canada's information professionals meet that challenge, that obligation that the public broadcaster have to provide news, even if what people are looking for are prefabricated news, are a bit twisted, that really meet where they're at and their mood at that moment. So I'd like to hear what you've done.
First off, I'm not sure that Canadians are looking for misinformation. They're simply wading into it. The misinformation comes to them. Then the way people consume information, well, they're receiving the information, and it's an endless feed, an endless Twitter, X feed, Facebook feed, and other information sources. Well, it continues and continues, unfortunately. More rigorous sources, like that of Radio-Canada, among other available media platforms that are more rigorous, well, they're also used by Canadians, and so we're competing for people's attention. But the reliability of our services is not in question, at least according to the polls that we have conducted. We have Canadians' trust concerning the information we give them. The point is to give them the information when they need it on the platform that they're on. So some people are easily able to reach us on platforms, be it our apps, our website. But there are people who do not go to our platforms because they're stuck on YouTube, for instance. And so a part of our strategy will be to ensure that for those who don't come to Canadian information platforms, to go where they are and to bring this content to them to ensure that contributes to their information diet. And so if you go on X, you'll see more misinformation. And it seems like trendy information, people aren't really going for traditional media anymore, like what we're seeing on CBC, Radio Canada. And that's also the challenge. You have to go against the commenting masses. Have you developed more in terms of that media offer? We often see commentators who are sovereignists, federalists, conservatives, liberals. Is that something that you currently find inevitable, obligatory as a media platform? I think that that's part of a balanced media diet because we have the facts, reporting on the ground, that's super important, and not just in the regions, but also ensuring that we're present internationally. There aren't many Canadian media institutions that are able to report internationally, and that's important for us. We also need to have commentators. That's part of a balanced media diet. Another important thing is to have formats and training that are appropriate for the uses, or rather, different kinds of media. So we have youth media, media for teenagers. We also have media for young adults. And so we have to keep on developing forms that are appropriate for various demographics. And so you mentioned a group that you need to reach, the non-users and those who are critical of CBC Radio Canada. How do you do that? How do you seek out those who are critical of your platform? Well, the big paradox of my first few weeks was going to Calgary and meeting teams, the CBC Calgary teams, the local teams, and seeing how strong that team was and seeing that Calgary is the #1 media in Calgary. That means something. Our team is close to the city of Calgary, and that's not the only city where CBC or Radio Canada is #1. Why? Because they're local, because it's a local media platform, and that leads to confidence. And so this local connection, we need to keep on making sure that that's strong. Earlier, you were talking about local. Oh, we'll speak more about that later. Thank you.
We'll go to Mr. Diot for 5 minutes. You have the floor.
Thank you, and thanks for being here, Madam President. I just wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I've got a great interest in the media myself. I was a journalist for 3 decades before getting into politics. I was also the president of the Edmonton chapter of the Canadian Association of Journalists and a national director of that association. And that association is all about trying to make journalism better. I think that that's a driving passion of me to this day. I think we need better journalists. We need more of them. And we need them to be balanced. Now, We've heard allegations from Travis Dunraj, who is not some rookie, some kid. We've heard allegations from your former employee that CBC was not balanced and is not fair and objective. How do you address that severe criticism? What do you say to that?
Well, I say that we strive to be balanced. Are we always, every minute of every day managing that? It's impossible to do that on every minute. But overall, we are striving to be balanced. Now, Mr. Dunraj is talking about his own experience. And again, I said that I wasn't able to comment on that. But we are aware that it's something that we need to work at all the time.
Why do you think you need to work at it all the time? Do you sense that there's not the balance that you would like?
It's very difficult to measure output. It's easier to measure the perception, and we do measure perception. Now, overall, the perception of balance is still very much measured around Canadians, but there are areas where we see that the numbers are a little lower. And those numbers that we get from the surveys that we conduct about the perception of balance, I think is a function of the fact that maybe we're not present enough in those locations. So I'm tying it into the local service,
right,
as a way to create that sense of inclusion, of reflection, that then draws into balance.
This is particular to Alberta. I believe you've had surveys that indicate that Albertans are not your biggest fans.
Well, again, paradox, because radio is very successful, but Alberta and Saskatchewan are areas where we need to invest.
Why do you think people in Saskatchewan and Alberta don't trust the CBC or feel that they're not balanced?
Well, I wouldn't say people in general don't trust, because that's not what the evidence or the surveys reveal. That the level of trust is not as high as we would like, but it is still majority of people who trust CBC.
Could you extrapolate a little bit the level of trust? So what don't they trust? What does that survey tell you?
The survey doesn't tell me exactly why their sentiment is what it is. They answer the question.
Not a very good survey, then.
I'm sorry?
Not a very good survey. Aren't you trying to gauge trust and balance? Is premier, as a journalist, of course, a long-time journalist, that's the premier thing that you want to achieve, right?
Well, you get a sense of that when you are in the field with the people, and that's when you are boots on the ground reporting that what's going on in the community, what are the preoccupations. I think that's how you enhance the sense of inclusion and the sense of trust.
Okay, I think that's a little vague, but as far as balance goes, I'm wondering if you would agree to table the last 5 Conservative voices that were on CBC News over the last 2 weeks. You were asked that previously, and we'd like to have it before the committee, provided no later than October 30th. Is that fair?
I'm assuming that's possible.
Okay, so you'll do that. There's an organization called All Sides Media. It looks at media bias. So here's an example of how they rated these media outlets. They rated The Atlantic, The Guardian, and The Huffington Post as left-wing media. They gave centrist ratings to Reuters, Christian Science Monitor, Forbes magazine, Wall Street Journal. Right-of-center media, they listed Fox News, National Review, and Epoch Times. Do those sound about where they should be? Would you agree with that list?
Well, I've seen those kinds of surveys, and it sounds about what I've seen from those surveys.
Okay, so.
And over to Ms. Royer now for 5 minutes.
Oh, I wanted that to continue.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Welcome, Marie-Philippe. Very pleased that you are here. I guess just a follow-up in the spirit of fairness. While you are preparing that report, it would be good to know how many conservatives were asked for interviews but also declined, particularly in the lead up through the election.
I think we can certainly add that information in.
Merci. There's an important distinction between a public broadcaster and a state media. And just because a broadcaster is publicly funded, it does not make it state-controlled media, as you know. And to be clear, CBC is a public broadcaster, not state media. It operates at arm's length from our government. Marie-Philippe, can you walk us through the key measures that ensure the CBC's independence and why it is inaccurate to compare it to state-controlled media?
Oh, there's many things, but it's built into the Broadcasting Act. I mean, the statement is very clear that all the framework around CBC, from its governance to its regulatory, to the span of regulation that the CRTC exercises, that it is there to safeguard the independence of the corporation vis-a-vis government in terms of its editorial and creative freedom. So we do have responsibilities in terms of accountability for management of the appropriation that we get, but we are independent from all government interference in terms of editorial direction and creative freedom. And those are the main aspects. But it's also verified by various organizations. We are subject to, or we get verification of our independence through the Journalists Initiative that certifies organizations worldwide as to their independence.
Thank you. I really appreciate your response. CBC Radio Canada's 2025 to 2030 strategy defines it as a national public service media organization that belongs to the public and creates public value by fostering democratic life and cultural cohesion. How do you measure that public value today, especially in an era when trust in institutions and media is declining?
Well, we measure public value, first of all, by many dimensions. The first one is use. How many Canadians use us and for what amount of time during their week or their month. That can be measured across platforms. So time spent and reach, that's a value to Canadians. We also measure how they perceive our service in terms of, yes, fairness and balance, but also reflection of their community, information about their concerns, and reflection of the diversity of the country. We measure our impact economically. We are an important trigger for expenditures in the creative sector. And we have a wide span in that way, and that creates value for Canadians. And we also want to measure the value for our employees. This is a large organization, and we look at various KPIs that value the experience of being an employee of CBC.
Merci. Can you very quickly describe an example where CBC's independence has been tested and upheld?
Oh, my God. That's my day-to-day life. I mean, because we have, well, first of all, there's the independence of the newsrooms. And our structure is such that we do protect the call and the decision-making capacity of our heads of news. And they are at a distance from other considerations or senior management. We also have independent ombudsmen that can look at complaints from the public about the application or the use of our journalistic standards and practices. And they are completely independent from the newsrooms, and they can give advice and render decisions on whether or not the JSPs, the journalistic practices, were respected in a particular case. So that's another sign of independence and of value to Canadians, because we are creating a framework where they do have a recourse and they can be heard.
Thank Mais, Monsieur Shampoo, vous avez 2 minutes.
Mr. Shampoo, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you. Ms. Bouchard, you did a 5-year strategic plan. You worked, it's going really fast. Technological evolutions are moving at breakneck speed. Is it possible that traditional TV has just disappeared from the media landscape? Traditional TV in the sense of the antenna, the physical antenna, there are still people who use it, especially in the Francophone market, and that's still a pretty dynamic market. And even among younger people, even though younger people are watching it less, well, it's stronger than in the Anglophone market. So as long as there's a use, I think that we can't leave people behind. People will still be attached to the traditional form of media. Is CBC aware that you might be the last in terms of traditional broadcasting with program shows? Well, it depends on the market dynamic because we're still strong in French because there are many of us. And so we're also waiting to see what happens to our colleagues. And it's hard, ad revenue is down, and so all that creates a fragile context that makes it harder to maintain audience parts that's as high. And it's important because it keeps Francophones in touch with local culture. And so if we get rid of that traditional TV, well, then you're losing a part of that. And we have to protect that. Yes, absolutely, that's reassuring. And you also mentioned earlier the collaboration that CBC can have with regional broadcasters with the aim of ensuring that there's quality journalistic coverage in the regions. Could you elaborate on that? Have you talked with potential partners? Is there openness? Yes, I had multiple meetings with Francophone media, private and community media. I also met a lot of Anglophone media and media in the North and so on and so forth. And the first question is, what's going well and what do you need? And then we look at, well, in our operations, our ways of seeing the future, how can we support what's going well? Bring down the costs of what's the most expensive. So sometimes we can share the costs of an election broadcast to make it cheaper for everyone. Sometimes it'll be giving images for an event cost-free. And so how we can reduce their costs and allow them to invest their money in distinct coverage, the coverage that distinguishes them, and we're taking all that into account.
You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome again, Madam Bouchard. You know, I looked at your 5-year plan for CBC, and right at top, you talk about accountability and transparency, which is any organization, those two should be on the top. But yet, to date, you've refused to provide any accountability to Canadians by sharing the numbers of CBC GEM. And that's an issue. We talked about it here with your predecessor, Ms. Tate, and she said, oh, it's going well. We got 2 million on and off viewers. But yet the subscribers vary because of the Olympics. They come on, they watch the Winter Olympics, and then they leave. But why aren't you disclosing those numbers on CBC GEM? I mean, your competitor may be Crave from the Bell Media, and they're trumpeting 4 million. So why would you not disclose CBC GEM numbers to the public? Because you're all about accountability and transparency.
Yeah. So the way people subscribe to platforms such as GEM or Crave is evolving quickly. Used to be, everybody was behind a paywall, and CBC was offering a hybrid model, both with TruTV and with GEM. We were, first of all, with GEM was completely free, and then we added on a tier of subscriber features that were essentially being able to watch without advertising and access to CBC Newsnet. So these are considerations that have play in the negotiations that we have with distributors, with bundling. And these are issues that are discussed under confidentiality when we are negotiating. Now, the fact of the matter is, this is CRTC, which is the body that governs all of the communication, telecommunication, and the platforms, considers this type of information specifically and treats it as confidential. So we have a situation where we've got the Information Commissioner who came to a conclusion, and we've got the CRTC that considers that to be confidential. So we really have a conflict of interpretation.
Hiding it. Are you embarrassed about the numbers of CBC GEM?
No.
Then why don't you come out and just say, here's the numbers that we got? I mean, you started this in 2019, CBC GEM. Mm-hmm. Now you have a 5-year mandate that you released last week. Give us some numbers.
Well, I can give you a number, which is 5,300,000, and that's the number of people who've created an account. That's not necessarily. No, not necessarily. But that number, the number of people who are paying, is a number we keep confidential for competitive reasons.
Yeah, I understand.
And it is validated by the CRTC. So we're asking the court to simply reconcile these two interpretations that are contradictory. That's what
So how much money have you put into GEM in the last 5 years? Do you know that?
I don't have that number.
Could you bring that number forward? I mean, we had Ms. Tate here glowingly talking about GEM and how it's doing. And we'd like to know how much money you've put into GEM. You have a 5-year commitment here that you released last week. So, I just looked at, you want more children, more newcomers, more youth. You want to get non-users getting involved, and you want dissatisfied users coming on board. Well, how are you going to do that when you're not really accountable and transparency with your numbers?
Oh, Mr. Waugh, I think, Madam Chair, I think our accounts are public. There's lots of transparency around how CBC receives and manages public funds and our commercial revenue as well. More transparency than most. Now, specifically on GEM, I'd just like to point out.
Oh, what the hell?
The
Sorry,
content.
let me refresh.
Yep.
Now, the content is multi-use, right? It
right.
finds its way on various platforms, to use that term. It can be linear TV, it can be on GEM, it can be on third-party platforms. So it's difficult to circumscribe what you're asking because,
Could you do your best for the committee? Bring some numbers in the next couple of weeks while we're asking.
The number I can talk to eventually, because I don't have that right now, is how much we've invested in technology.
Yeah,
but, in terms of content, that would be impossible to determine because of the multi-use of
then
the
just
content.
give us the number that you've invested into GEM. That would really help, I think. It would help because it's one of your growing platforms. As you mentioned, radio, TV is dying. So could you bring those numbers forward?
I wouldn't say radio is dying. In fact, we are still very successful with radio. But
radio would say
let
radio's
me see
dying.
what I can
bring forward.
Radio itself.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waugh. Mr. Alsud, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's great to see you, and it's great to be back in committee. Madame Bouchard, I'd like to thank you as well for taking the time to be with us. I'd also like to congratulate you. I know that it was only in January that you started your mandate, but it was announced in October a year ago, so congratulations to that. Last week, like many of my colleagues, I had the privilege of spending much more time than usual in my riding. This also meant I could attend things that I might otherwise have missed. On Thursday, for instance, I attended a parliamentary workshop with some brilliant students. Of course, I'm biased. I'm a UTM graduate. And we talked about a lot of different things. Parliamentary procedure, being young in the world of politics, artificial intelligence and energy innovation. But the conversation that stuck with me most, was that on polarization. Canadians, especially young Canadians, are tired of watching politics take precedent over priorities. In a study by the Public Policy Forum in August 23, more than 70% of respondents said that Canada was moderately to severely polarized. More than 45% expected it to get worse over the next 5 years. Some of 25% are very or extremely worried that Canada itself is threatened by these political divisions. So I have 3 questions for you. They are many, so if you'd like to take much of the time, that's perfectly okay. If not, I have other questions, I promise. Firstly, could you briefly speak to this rising trend of political polarization and how it might impact the work done at the CBC Radio-Canada? Secondly, what role do you believe media might have played in propagating this trend? But also, what do you believe media could play in terms of fixing this, or at least helping fix this trend that we've seen?
Well, it certainly has transformed the landscape and the expectations of audiences as well. It's evident in many ways in the reliability of the information that they see, and we see also with the AI tools that are now being deployed, sometimes for the better, but a lot of times for the worse, in terms of manipulating pictures and making believable something that is completely fictitious. So that's a serious concern, and that's a concern that we navigate through even in our, reporting on daily basis. Our reporters are faced with people who are less likely to consider speaking to reporters simply because, they don't know whether or not they can rely on what they see. So that's a global problem for all of the media. It's not specific to CBC Radio-Canada, but we are very much in the field in these situations, and so it does impact us. Now, what can we do? So we've already started, and I think we need to expand on that. Invest in media literacy through tools that are available to everyone. So having specific beats of journalists who are explaining how certain facts were distorted by certain sources, so that people develop their own ability to distinguish between fact and fiction and manipulation and disinformation. I think we could, as a media, collectively, and with schools and universities, do a lot more in that area. We do, in fact, we have a program where we go into universities and we have these discussions as Radio-Canada and CBC with students about how they can arm themselves against the risks of disinformation and manipulation, and how to better identify reliable sources and to question what they see. And so I think we need to invest collectively, but CBC Radio-Canada has potentially a leadership role. We've developed tools, we can share them. Again, I was speaking earlier about the conversation on comments from users. You see sometimes horrible stuff to the point where, some stories are just closed for comments because it was just
like
not
yours?
possible to entertain that kind of conversation. It's not a conversation, it's a shouting match, and it's insulting.
Like your
and
YouTube
so we
comments.
need to reestablish a space where people can have a reasoned conversation and learn from each other. And we are working with partners on developing such a tool. Now, it's not going to replace the big platforms, but if we can give the taste of having civilized conversations somewhere, maybe it'll give people a sense that it can be something else. It can return to something a little bit more helpful, useful, to open your mind, to make up your own mind. That, I think, that's the most tragic thing. If we end up as a people not being able to decide for ourselves because we don't know what's true and what's not, what we can rely on and what we can't, then that becomes really a threat to democracy.
Very well said. Thank you. Monsieur Généreux, vous avez...
Mr. Généreux, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Ms. Bouchard, for being here today. I want to look at some numbers. The total 2025 budget for CBC Radio-Canada was around 1.4 million. Is the 150 million that the government promised you was provided, or is it part of your annual budget this year? No, in fact, the 1.4 billion is the amount of the vote. It's of the appropriation. It's not our total budget because it doesn't include our independent revenue. In the past, there were bonuses that were provided to executives. On the 7,000 employees at Radio-Canada CBC, how many people are considered executive out of the 7,000? Well, I mean, it depends what you call it. There's about 1,200 managers, but the executives, the top tier is about 200, I believe. But the non-affiliated employees, those are who are not unionized, those who are professional employees are 1,200, and the executives is a smaller group. And is it for the executives or the 1,200 people who got the bonuses? It was 1,200, yes. So you decided to eliminate that way of proceeding, I believe? But the salary mass went up by millions of dollars, 40 million. No, it's not quite. It's 37 million, but that includes salary increases to all unionized members, and 80% of our workers are unionized. So the 37 million includes those salary increases that were negotiated as part of the collective agreements. And they're good for how long? Well, I believe there's a variety. They are good till 2026, 2027, for example. The amounts that haven't been provided by the government yet, it'll be 2026, 2027 before you get that money? Well, it depends. I don't have information on that. It depends on the parliamentarians. Well, in that case, the salary increases generally will be eating up a large portion of that money. No, I don't think you could draw that conclusion from that. First, the salary increases that were provided were planned for. And therefore, now we're restarting our budgetary cycle, waiting for Parliament's decisions as for that part of the budget. Of the 1,200 people who are senior management, is it possible to get a document, which of course would remain confidential here, to see what their increases would be in their salaries, so we can compare what they had before and what they have now, without bonuses now? Because, I'm an entrepreneur, because it doesn't happen often because things aren't very easy right now. But once in a while, some years we can provide bonuses. Now, are the bonuses provided based on certain indicators, performance indicators? I believe they were in the past, but now that there aren't any bonuses, I mean, you could interpret that different ways. But are there any criteria now? Or
what the hell?
Since you have removed those criteria, how can you justify any increases without an increase in the number of listeners or the growth of your audience or services? I mean, how can you justify providing higher salaries? Well, there were many questions in that one question. I'll try to be brief and to try to answer all your various questions. So first of all, we do have a report from the Mercer firm on our corporate website. And that's one that the board had requested to make sure our system, our overall salary system was being done properly, and I'll say that not all 1,200 of those people are executives, the non-affiliated members, and how the variables, that variable component, what we call bonuses, was used, and we want to remain at the medium point in the medium. So that means 50% of similar corporations will pay more and 50% will pay less than we do. What the Mercer firm did when we considered and when we looked at getting rid of the bonuses, executive bonuses, what we wanted to do was ensure that we retained our position at the median of the market so that we could retain our ability to attract and keep good employees. And we also didn't want to lower our standards and our position in the industry. So we made adjustments to maintain our position, but that was an adjustment that was made, but they're not going to happen all the time. So, yep, your time is up.
Mr. Miles, I'll turn the floor over to you for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, and thanks very much for being here. One thing I've come to realize about the CBC Radio-Canada over the last number of years is that it's not only the people who don't like it that criticize it, it's also the people who do like it that criticize it. And I think there's room for that. I think it's one of these things where it's a Canadian institution that can be better, and it's okay for Canadians to ask it to become better and to challenge it. And I've seen it change over the years. I will say I don't listen to all the CBC programs, although I've been listening to Power and Politics while I work out in the morning. And just to let my colleagues know, Larry Brock, Scott Aitchison, Andrew Scheer, Melissa Lantzman, Michelle Rempel-Garner have all been on it since I started listening over the last couple months. So the representation has been there on that one show that I'm listening to. And they did a great job. Your colleagues did a great job on that show. And that's just one show. I am curious about this polarization conversation. I think what's happening now is that the conversation about diversity is becoming about diversity of opinion, diversity of thought. How does that become part of the diversity conversation on the broadcaster? When we think about, this is what I think a lot of members are bringing up. When we think about polarization in Canada, it seems to me that one of the great sources of polarization is actually urban versus rural. And I'm wondering if some of the polling has given you a similar sense. And also if maybe some of the centralization that took place over the last 15 years, I noticed that there's a bit of a reversal to this thought. And I wonder if this is an effort to address that rural-urban divide, which I think is probably one of the stronger divides, more so than right-left in Canada, is that. I just wondered if that was some of the thinking.
I completely agree, first of all, with all of that, what you said. I've worked with CBC Radio-Canada for a long time, and I've been constantly asked, we would like this. People ask a lot of their public broadcaster, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. I've always found that to be positive because they feel attached to it. They feel that it's essential to them. They want it to be as good as it can be. And so that's a great motivator for us, the employees, and for me, their leader. To have that sense of connection and of expectation. That pushes us to go further. So that's a good thing. And I think our plan, you'll find, is honest about it. We can do better, and we want to. In terms of rural and urban, I completely agree with you. And when I started in the mid-'80s, I'm old, we had so many people and so many shows in so many locations. And then through various waves of budget cuts, we got more and more centered into large urban areas. And we lost something there. We maintained some of it on radio, but television definitely got more and more, because it was more expensive to make, it got more and more centered into big locations. And we find that, especially when I was visiting out west, I had a lot of conversations with business people, with ordinary citizens, with other media, emerging and established, about that, about how we need to hear more about what matters to people in the farming industry, in the fisheries, in various locations that are really important for our economic development, for our culture, but we seem to be too far from them. To hear from them on a regular basis. So we've done some wonderful things like going out to locations for a day or two and sitting with people and just listening. That's not continuous service, so that's not enough. But at least it opens the mind to the things that you don't see when you don't run into these people on a day-to-day basis, when they don't know you. And so I strongly believe that the local extension and reestablishing ourselves in a number of locations where we've never been or have not been in a long time is of great value. We need to do that in also awareness of what is the state of local media in those locations, and making sure that we partner where we can, where we support, and so that there is a diversity of voices, that we don't find ourselves to be the sole supplier of information. That would be a loss for Canadians. So it's a balance, but I believe that you're right that the urban-rural divide is contributing to a sense of disconnect.
For sure, hearing those stories on the air, especially on the national broadcaster, I think is an important part. It is a major part of our country.
Unfortunately, your time's up,
Okay.
Mr.
Thank you.
Miles.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Great conversation. Monsieur Champoux, vous avez la parole.
Over
2 minutes et demie.
Eh boy. Merci.
Over to you for 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much. In your action plan, you have actions written, a lot of good intentions. I'm excited to see how it'll play out. And there's one paragraph interesting in particular. You want more culture, sport, amateur sports, and music, and you're going to particularly pay attention to francophones. It'll also allow organizations to take advantage of visibility. My question is, will you bring back the Héros du Samedi? I don't know. And if you bring back the Saturday Hero, are you committed to keeping the same original music? Oh, you're nostalgic, Mr. Champoux. Yes. Yes, but more seriously, I see a lot of good commitments here. And someone asked earlier about increased financing proposed by the Liberals. Do you already have projects to integrate that extra amount of money? For instance, by responding to one of the requests, the general request, to progressively phase out ads, but also make it completely free. Could that money help to do that? The idea is to create public value. So it's a question of balance as well, depending on if the funds will be available, how fast the funds will be available, will the funding remain stable? That's a very important data point, because there were investments in the past. We were really happy for it, but it was only investment for 1 or 2 years, and afterwards there's less investment. So we can't make sustainable investments. And in terms of regional deployment, well, those are people. We're hiring people. So we can't just hire people on a temporary basis. And so the structural changes you're mentioning, well, they use resources. And so if we don't have a balance with extra resources, if those resources aren't stable, well, it's hard to make those commitments, because once we've well, we need predictability. And for the time being, I don't have that predictability. But seeing the model, for instance, the budget model for CBC, the financing, we've mentioned it a lot during these discussions, the major consultations that Madame Saint-Onge did to re-see that financing and increase it to allow CBC to phase out ads. Is that something you think you can do? Is that something that you'd be open to? Not much time left. Well, I'll refer to my previous response. There's also value in Radio Canada's presence in the Francophone market, in the ad market, to maintain a critical mass, so it doesn't all go to Google. So we have to take that into account. Now, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about news. We're not talking about all of it. And in terms of news, there are those who are pros in terms of not having ads, but we have to ensure that that doesn't deprive us of important resources in order to invest in our service. There you go.
Before we go any further, I represent Hamilton, Ontario, a riding in Hamilton, Ontario, which, as I'm sure you know, instead is this biggest city in the country that doesn't have an independent CBC radio station. Several years ago, I think we got a interim internet-based team, but as far as I can tell, that team has actually shrunk in the interim years. It hasn't grown. There's still no CBC radio. Last year, Global News shut down CMHL, 900 CMHL radio, which Hamiltonians have been used to going to for many years for news and information. Those reporters are sorely missed in our community. And now there's a resurgence of energy among Hamiltonians to bring a CBC radio outlet to Hamilton. There is a station available to take over, CMHL, 900 CHML. So there's something available that Hamiltonians are used to tuning into for news and information. It's something that I think Hamilton really would like to have the advantage of extra reporting from CBC. We're not Toronto, and it's not sufficient to Hamiltonians to say, well, you get 99.1, because it's a different market, it's a different community. So I'd like a response to that, please.
Well, I'm going to take it under advisement, but I'm aware that we've established some time ago, what we called a digital station, and it's not the same as having a full-fledged antenna and radio and signage and so on. But I'll look into it.
Thank you. That's all I ask. Mrs. Thomas, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Bouchard, on September 15th, during a Radio Canada broadcast, CBC journalist Elisa Saray, she made unfortunate comments, and quote, as she said, "It's the Jews who finance a lot of American politics," end quote. Then another quote, "The big cities are run by Jews," end quote. Another quote, she said, "Hollywood is run by Jews," end quote. Now, I recognize that Ms. Saray has been put on indefinite leave, is my understanding from the CBC, but I'm curious if, as CEO, do you unequivocally condemn these comments?
I actually apologize to all of our employees for that incident, and the news management apologized to all viewers for that incident. It is unacceptable.
Okay, so do you unequivocally condemn these comments as extremely racist?
As unacceptable, hurtful, and contrary to our journalistic standards and practices.
Okay, I appreciate that. But this isn't the first time that this has actually happened, where we've seen anti-Semitic rhetoric used by the CBC and unfair reporting. So, for example, during the events of October 7th, when those were reported by the CBC, throughout that time, statistics were often taken from Hamas itself, which of course is a terrorist entity, and used by the CBC as if it was from a government ministry itself. In addition to that, there was a news article or news reported from the CBC with regards to a supposed hospital bombing by Israel. And of course, that was pushed out by the CBC as this alarming, breaking news, only to find out moments later, actually, it was a misguided missile from Hamas, and it wasn't a hospital, it was a parking lot next to the hospital. By that point, you can imagine the hatred and the outrage that had already been targeted towards a vulnerable population that exists here in Canada already, of course, our Jewish community. So it's been time after time after time, and unfortunately, I don't actually have the allotment of time to outline all of the incidents, but this has happened a lot. What are you doing to tackle this anti-Semitic rhetoric that exists within the CBC and its news reporting?
Well, if there is any incidence of inaccurate reporting. There is a process. It's called the Ombudsman's Office. We answer an awful lot of questions and complaints, first of all, by news management itself, and then if the complainant is not satisfied with the answer they get, they have full access to the Ombudsman. And this is how we get better. If there's mistakes being made, then there is full transparency on that.
With all due respect, it's not getting better, though. I mean, here we are. This most recent event just took place on September 15th, where, extremely racist, extremely anti-Semitic comments were made on the airwaves. So I guess my question to you on behalf of the Canadian public, and in particular on behalf of the Jewish community, would be, will you, as the CEO of the CBC, will you undertake a thorough investigation to confront this type of systematic racism that exists within your organization?
What we do and what we've endeavored to do is to train and support our journalists and our teams to identify situations where statements could be made by third parties, by witnesses, by whatever, and to treat those with care. We try and source our material the best way we can, and to live up to our standards. We are constantly reminding what our standards are.
My question is very straightforward. It's just yes or no, and that is, will you do an investigation? Will you make sure that from top to bottom within your organization that there is not, in fact, a line of systemic racism?
We have very robust journalistic processes and protocols. They are examined on a continuous basis for all sorts of potential situations.
What I'm hearing from you, with all due respect, Ms. Bouchard, is an unwillingness to do a re-examination. You're stating to this committee that it's okay, everything is fine, you've already done everything that possibly can be, and therefore there's nothing to see here. Turn away, folks, and look elsewhere. I'm asking you if you would dare to take a second look inside your organization. Would you dare to take a second look? Would you dare to do an investigation?
I'm sorry, Madam President. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying journalism is a continuous process of questioning, of revisiting, of challenging, and this is how we live. This is what we do. So we don't have to stop everything to do a full investigation. We are constantly challenging ourselves.
So no further insight.
Thank you. Mr. Miles, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I had a question. Oh, yeah, I'm on. I had a question about the mandate. I always find the mandate interesting. I think the mandate is something along the lines of promoting Canadian stories, exporting Canadian stories to the world, strengthening local artists and Canadians telling stories about themselves to other Canadians, uniting the country. I guess what I'm interested in is the relationship between the mandate and ratings, because it's a tricky balance. I think about the cultural program. I think about CBC Radio Top 20. If we're talking about cultural programming, I'm sure it's the same in Radio-Canada. There's always a tendency to want to play American hits because it gets people through the door. I'm sure in television, American sitcoms gets people in, ratings go up. But then at the same time, that doesn't actually speak to why it's publicly funded, why it has a mandate that it does, why it, then all of a sudden it's competing with commercial entities, in major markets on the, let's say, soft rock market. They're playing similar music at similar times. How can CBC lean into the mandate? And what is that relationship like with ratings? Because it is a tricky balance.
An old boss of mine used to say there's no public broadcasting without a public. So we need to be reaching people. And that's why I was saying reach is a real important factor. How many Canadians do actually tune in to our programming wherever, on whatever platform, even if they tune into YouTube or TikTok, but it's a CBC produced or CBC acquired content, that counts for us. That's a way to touch people. We're not in a race to be number one. Sometimes we end up being number one, and that's a sort of a byproduct. of putting out good content that people want to listen to or want to watch. And again, the radio success is all about the local and our ability to be close to where people live and what's important to them. I think in music, I ran Ici Musique on the French side for a number of years with great joy. It's doing incredibly well with a very unorthodox sort of approach to music radio. It's not formatted. It's multi-genre, and it's growing. And so that says something about our ability to mediate between artists and the public and intelligently bringing discovery into their lives. That's a craft, and that's something that our people are really great at. So I think it's a mix of making sure we have moments where we can all feel together. Last Saturday, again on Radio-Canada, was the 400th episode of, oh my God, what's the name of the show?
You don't know because you don't watch it.
En direct de l'univers, merci. It was all about the public who were fans of that show. It's been going on for 17 years. And it's a great showcase for talent, for local talent. And we do that. We do that on CBC. We do that on Radio-Canada. And it's not about the commercial value or the mass audience. It's about the feeling together and the cultural experience that we generate.
There's did you think that over the years that you've been there, it's leaned sometimes more towards, because there must be a balance. At some point, you know that you can play Beyonce every hour and it's going to bump up ratings, so at what level do you say no to Santana and say yes to?
Well, first of all, we've made our music formula to be essentially Canadian. We have the highest volume of Canadian plays of the market. So and also we have a diversity of genres, which is unheard of. But we also have authors. We are a great force behind selling books. Canadian authors through our programs and our contests of Canada Reads and the equivalent in French. That sells books for our artists, for our creators. So we have a real influence in how people experience culture and discover emerging artists, and it's really important. But we also have these moments where people feel together around comedy, around a great show that is iconic to their experience as Canadians.
Do you see the cultural programming moving into the regions as well?
We have some already. I think the digital formats help us a lot because it's less constraining than the traditional full production of television. Audio is easy. Audio is already fully cultural and decentralized. But television is a little trickier, and it's easier to consider having multiple types of experiences and formats in digital.
Local music shows, for instance, in each of these regions.
Thank you, Mr. Miles.
Yeah, all good. Thank you.
Time is up. I'm going to turn to Mrs. Thomas we can have time to do 2 more rounds as long as we get through quickly. So, Mrs. Thomas, you have 6 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Ms. Bouchard, I guess my question is with regards to temporary foreign workers. It's come to light that the CBC hired 20 positions since 2015, just within Ontario alone, and that these positions were deemed, quote, high wage. Why are Canadian workers not good enough for the CBC?
As far as I know, currently there are no such temporary foreign workers employed at CBC. So I don't know the history of the 2015 that you're citing, but right now there are none.
Did you see the report that came out? You're unaware that there's any report of temporary foreign workers being employed
what I'm
by
saying
the
is that
CBC?
my information is currently there are none.
That's not what I'm asking about, is it?
Well, I don't know about 2015. I wasn't there.
Sure. You're very good at skirting questions and trying to slough them off as if it's up to the last CEO and you're not responsible for answering for the organization anything past the last 11 months. But Ms. Bouchard, you are in this seat. You occupy this title, this role, and therefore the responsibility that comes with it. there is an expectation that you would have some familiarity with the history of the CBC and the decisions that have been made. Since 2015, 20 temporary foreign workers were employed by the CBC, and that's just from the province of Ontario alone. Are Canadian workers not good enough for the CBC?
We employ 7,000 Canadians at this stage. That's how many Canadians work for CBC. I think they're exemplary employees. I don't see why you would state that Canadian workers are not good enough for CBC.
Let's not put words in my mouth, Ms. Bouchard. I did not make that statement, but CBC's actions are making that statement. CBC's actions are pointing to the belief that Canadian workers are somehow not good enough. I mean, some of these positions that were filled are computer programmers, computer network technicians, business management consulting, marketing researchers, announcers, and broadcast technicians. We have many individuals in this country who would be more than happy to fill those roles and more than qualified to fill those roles. So my question is, why weren't Canadians given priority over temporary foreign workers?
Again, I don't know what you're referring to in the sense that I wasn't there, but the evidence that I have is that there is no foreign worker working for CBC at this point, and there are 7,000 employees who are Canadian.
Would you commit to providing this committee then with the total number of temporary foreign workers that were hired within the CBC and CBC Radio Canada in the past 10 years and the positions for which they were hired, and you would provide that to the report by the end of October?
I don't know if that information exists. So if it does,
you don't know who's worked at your company?
But I don't know if it exists or not. I'm not familiar with it.
You don't know who's worked at your company?
Employment records for the last 10 years would not exist anywhere at the CBC?
I'm just saying I don't know if they exist. So if they do exist, I will gladly provide them to you. If they don't, they don't.
Okay. Okay. I would appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm going to pass the floor to my colleague, Mr. Waugh.
Like 30,000 emails, they just got deleted.
If you don't mind, Ms. Bouchard. You said the CRTC may consider the subscription numbers confidential, but does it forbid you yourself from releasing the numbers, or is that your decision, and your decision only for releasing them?
You're absolutely correct. It's not a ban on releasing information. It's just a matter of what are the conditions under which we are expected to negotiate with distributors. We have discussions with all sorts of distributors for our content, for our platforms, for our apps, and that creates a context where information may not be available to the people you're negotiating with.
So your lawyers today went to court trying to prevent the subscription numbers for CBC Gem. So, I mean, you were very active today, your organization, sending your lawyers ahead saying, no, we're not going to talk about subscription of CBC Gem. Why?
I restate my answer to your previous question. We are in the market negotiating with providers on a commercial basis for distribution. There's information that is sometimes sensitive in those negotiations. We have a regulatory body who recognizes that sensitivity and allows people, businesses that are in this market, to consider that information confidential. And we have an interpretation by the Information Commissioner that says that we have not met the standard for that confidentiality. We want reconciliation between those two interpretations. And that's why we asked the federal court to consider the situation.
Okay, you're right. The Information Commissioner a while ago asked for CBC to disclose that numbers. And I don't know what you're hiding. I really don't, because you're a public broadcaster. You're getting the funds from the public. And you're not in competition with Bell Media, Crave, or any of those. And I know the metrics of radio and TV and digital. I don't see the issue of CBC Gem not saying we own 1,500 subscribers. It's been going on for 6 years. I think that's the least with your accountability and your transparency that you talk about on the 5-year plan.
Oh, what the hell?
Accounts created. Okay.
Accounts are different than subscriptions.
I agree. They're different than paying subscriptions.
That's your time, Mr. Waugh. Thank you very much. Mr. Alsud, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Bonjour, Madame Bouchard. You've been very frank with your answers, and I want you to know that it's appreciated. You mentioned AI tools earlier during your excellent response. As you may know, this committee is currently undergoing a study on the impact of technological advancements in artificial intelligence on Canada's creative industries. I'd like to offer you to speak, the opportunity to speak to CBC Radio-Canada's perspective on this, the way that it's impacting journalists, the way in which you operate. I'm also interested in knowing what role you believe the CBC and Radio-Canada might be able to play in setting national standards for ethical and transparent AI use.
That's a very, very active and interesting question, and I think it's on everybody's mind that is in the creative sector. There's concerns about intellectual property being stolen through AI processes, the scraping that's going on, that's affecting all the media organizations that are deprived of their intellectual property, of the hardworking reporting that they're paying for and they're producing that is being used to train models. There's concerns about artists being dubbed or having their voice fabricated and them speaking stuff that they've never said. Sometimes to defraud people, that's even worse for their image. There's a lot of scary stuff going on. There's also a lot of potential in AI, and that's the paradox. I mean, we can all sit back and say that's horrible, but it's happening, or we can leverage it to some extent and use it for good. And I think we've got a lot of really smart scientists at in our country who are well equipped to help us tackle this potential, and at the same time trying to protect. But there's a role for government. There's definitely a role for government for setting some rules, from ground rules, so that we can protect intellectual property and the value of people's investment in their creation. And at the same time, there's also a lot of work to be done on media literacy to safeguard the ability of citizens to understand where they're getting their information. Is that reliable? Is that fake? Is that a deep fake? And then there's how the media and the community itself can work together to develop practices and ways of working that is in fact respectful of IP, that is respectful of facts and of the citizens, but improves productivity and allows us to create more content at a reasonable cost because we have mastery of those tools. So we definitely have to share and work together. I don't think it's a case where in silo everyone can develop their own. We're too small compared to the big guys who are right now just descending on the whole world. And there would be great value in working together. We have conversations with partners, with potential partners about their challenges and the possibility that we can join forces. And I expect these conversations to continue and accelerate.
Fantastic. Thank you once again for a very comprehensive response. Je change de sujet.
I'm going to change topics. I really like Toronto, especially when the Blue Jays play the way they're playing. But on the media side in Mississauga, we see certain things happening, and broadcasters play a very important role. And it's possible that big broadcasters get all the attention and the smaller ones don't as much. Could you tell us about what you're doing about that? Well, in our regional development deployment plan, we have targeted markets that are smaller, adjacent to larger ones. Often, Madam Chair talked about Hamilton, and I'm very aware of that, yes. But in Quebec, for example, the region of Chaudière-Appalaches and Lévis in the Greater Toronto Area, the Peel region, these are markets that have their own cultural, economic life, but they they don't always get service from a main tower, for example, in a large downtown. So the idea is to create smaller offices, to create platforms, content from those smaller offices. And that means that we can create local content, but also have those communities seen across the country. So that's a double benefit for those communities. To us, it gives us an opportunity to be in closer proximity, because there are, of course, a very urban, very rural, and also the periphery to larger centers that are there. And so maybe it's in those peripheries sometimes that trust can be not eroded, but, they just don't get as much. So the idea is to reinforce that.
Having one of the most transparent and trustworthy media landscapes, demonstrated through CBC Radio-Canada's recertification by Reporters Without Borders Journalism Trust Initiative in September of 2024. Could you speak to why you think Canada is perceived as transparent and trustworthy globally?
Well, first of all, I think we have a very robust governance structure for media. I mean, we have independent public media, and we have private and community media. The broadcasting sector has always been a hybrid market, and we had historically a very strong written press. Now, that's been challenged to a large degree, and I'm hoping that can transform and morph into something else. There still remains large publications that are more digital than paper now, but they're still very significant. So it's the diversity of the sources is the one of the factors. The existence of legal protections for journalists and for media that ensure their independence, that protect their sources, that support their ability to access information, government information. The fact that government officials respond, because there are cultures, there are countries where you can ask all you want. You're not going to get an answer. Well, our governments feel that they are responsible and they answer questions from journalists. That all induces a culture that makes the media more reliable, more trustworthy, and more independent.
Thank you. Martin Champoux, vous avez la parole.
Mr. Martin Champoux, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Bouchard, when you look around the table, you'll see that some of us have a bit of gray hair. That means that we've seen, some are hiding it well, of course, but there are some of us who came up through this period when we had to be a little bit curious to try to get information. We had to plan when we were going to watch the news in our evenings. We had to go look for newspapers. It's a time when there were fewer informed people and more who were uninformed. What we see today, however, is that there are people who are well informed because we've kept that curious side, going to look for information, looking at sources and so on. We have a bunch of tools that allow us to do so, but there are also people, I would say, who are in contact with the news, but from various sources. You've talked about digital diversity earlier. That's what I want to talk about. I feel like today it's an even greater challenge because we are not just trying to inform people who have less access to or are less in contact with the news, but we also need to correct what's happening when people get information from unreliable sources or less reliable sources. You talked about AI, for example, and some of the things that are happening. So what do you do when your mandate, your mission is to improve digital literacy, curiosity of the upcoming generations? How do you meet that challenge without losing hope? Because sometimes I feel like it's an uphill battle. I don't want to say it's a lost battle, but it's a huge battle. Yes, it is a huge challenge, as you say. I think the first thing to do is to be there. That means being visible, being seen where people get their information. So there are entire cohorts of young people who are on YouTube full time. So if we don't provide rigorous, visible content on YouTube, well, we're missing that opportunity. There's also the fact of being present, having a presence in educational activities, for example, being in contact with young people. We go into schools with Radio-Canada, throughout the year, or they come visit us, so that they can see how the newsroom works, how news is made or provided. Everybody can look at a video, watch a video, but what's happening in the background? Why do you need fact-checking? Why are two sources necessary because one isn't enough? All of that education means that young people are better equipped to judge and to assess what they're looking at. So I think we have work to do with other media, with schools. And that's where I'm going. What I want to talk about. I heard earlier what you were talking about, the efforts you're making. You're there. You're trying to reach people, young people, broadcast information in formats that they use. But social media are still huge machines. I mean, you can go on TikTok for every piece of real information. There's going to be 150 videos that are not. So we have, as a society, to find a way to identify or to have identified content that has not been checked or that is not reliable. And we have to do that work ourselves as citizens. And we have to train young people. You talked about cooperating with schools. So what age should we start, teaching kids about how to use social media, other media, the platforms? I feel like we're falling behind and we're not doing that work. And while we're not doing that work, that means generations and years of young people's lives where they are at risk of falling into that trap.
I'm sorry, man. The fact that you think you need to teach a kid how to use social media, he could teach you how to use it.
Proper news and fact-checking on some of those platforms and social media are not there at all. Sometimes there's self-regulation. For example, for us, it's CRTC, there's the Ombudsman and so on. But in the case of platforms, there's nothing. There's no framework that holds anybody accountable. In order to make sure citizens are better equipped, well, we can see that there is some important work that was done in the Scandinavian countries, I believe, and it's work that needs to continue to support these types of initiatives aimed at helping. There needs to be cooperation from civic society because we can't count on the platforms. Yes, you're quite right. And because when we ask questions, I mean, it's always hard. I think we'll be able to meet with people on Wednesday, I believe. When we say we have a hard time getting false advertising removed. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Champoux, we have a problem with interpretation.
For a minute while we try and deal with the problem.
Oh, it just so happens there's a problem with the interpretation as we're going to the Conservative round? Oh. Well, that's convenient, huh? There's only 15 minutes left. Why do I have a feeling they're going to just filibuster this 15 minutes and try and call it a tech issue, just when it so happens to go around to the Conservative round? Oh, that's convenient, huh? Very convenient. Let's see if there's something else we can tune into in the meantime. Let's see what's going on in the House. Yeah, we'll tune into the House for a few minutes while they're on break.
We used to have a country that was safe, was secure, the envy of the world, a country that worked for Canadians, a country that protected Canadians. And they might say they're a new government. They might be, I know they're heckling right now, they might think that this is a brand new government. It's not. It's the same MPs the same Liberal member of parliaments, the same cabinet ministers, the same failed Liberal policies. And I know they're not happy with what I'm saying, but it's their policies that have hurt Canadians every single day. Under their watch, we've had the fastest shrinking economy, the fastest shrinking, where Canadians are now lining up at food banks, where crime, chaos, and drugs are running rampant right across our country. Record numbers in crime. Drugs are now being sold in our streets. Our kids are losing their lives. Under their watch, in their 10 years, 50,000 Canadians have lost their lives to drug overdoses. 50,000. That's more than the Second World War. We've had a homelessness crisis. Encampments are popping up in my riding in Oxford County, but also across our country from coast to coast to coast. Canadians are suffering. They're suffering from their failed policies. On immigration, we had one of the best immigration programs in the world. It was the envy of the world. We brought in the brightest, the best, people that could achieve their full potential, people that filled major needs in our country, that were able to raise their family. But under their watch, they broke that too. They broke our immigration system. And then they started hijacking our institutions. They started censoring Canadians. They started telling Canadians what they could do, where they can go, what they can say, what they can see. It became about control. All about control, Mr. Speaker. And again, with C2, when they first brought that in, they talked about public safety. They talked about immigration. But it was another attempt of attacking Canadians' freedoms, their privacy. They wanted to attack their way of life. And it was because of the Conservatives and other parties and Canadians who raised their voices, who objected, who said no to their policies, that we now have Bill C-12 in Parliament today. Now, if you look at immigration, Mr. Speaker, I'm a proud son of immigrants. My parents chose Canada in the early 80s. They came for that Canadian dream. They worked hard, played by the rules, were able to earn a decent living, raise a family under their watch. But guess what? We don't have that system anymore. They have broken that system almost in all aspects. Let's take a look at the asylum system. We have over 300,000 folks lined up to get asylum. Many cases are bogus, fake asylum claims. A system that is now full with fraud, with abuse, with an average wait time of almost 44 months to process in our country. And this all started because of their actions. You might remember, Mr. Speaker, it was this government that put out a famous tweet when Trump was voting the first time saying, everybody's welcome. And guess what happened? You think that was the best tweet? They think that's the best tweet ever. That tweet brought in over 100,000 illegal border crossers to Roxham Road. It put pressure on our system. Many of those cases were bogus. But you can't fix stupid, Mr. Speaker. That was a dumb move by this government, a dumb move by that former prime minister. They're making policy based on tweets. That's how they run this government. It is their failures that have led to the trouble we're seeing today. And so I find it ironic when they put policy forward saying they're going to fix this system. It's a new government. It's their own doing. They did this. They broke it. And this is going to continue, sadly. And we saw it at the border as well. Canada's U.S. border, one of the longest borders, an important hub for economics, an important hub for security. You know, $2 billion of trade cross-border every single day. We have a massive economic opportunity. Most of Canadians live 100 kilometers away from the border or within the border. So it's an important transportational, logistical hub for us to have a system that works for both Canada and the U.S. where we could have strong economic ties. On security, it's even more important, to keep Canadians safe. Under their watch, we've had record numbers of crime. One of the highest, gun crime, homicides, all have gone up. And if you look at the border, we've seen a massive rise in guns being smuggled in. And while they might believe that it's lawful, law-abiding firearms owners that are the problem, they're not. I have been a firearms owner for over 15 years. I love going to the range. I'm a sports shooter. Folks like myself, farmers, hunters, are not the problem. It's their weak border policies, their open border policies. Toronto police, law enforcement across our country have made it very, very clear. 90% of the guns that come into our country are illegal guns. The criminals are not using guns from lawful gun owners, they're smuggling them in through the border. And those guns are now in our communities. They're being used for organized crime. They're being used to kill children. And if you can't secure the border, if you can't stop that from happening, we're going to keep on losing Canadians. We have cartels now that are operating in a country. Seven, under their watch.
Chinese police stations
under their soft on crime policies, open border policies, failure to secure our border. We have 7 cartels that are operating, that are illegally moving around drugs, money laundering, pushing guns, and yet they have the audacity to stand up in this house and say, oh, we're going to fix the problem. They are the problem. It's them, their failed policies. And it continues. Drugs keep being pushed in. In Oxford County, we are on the 401 and 403. It has become, sadly, a hub for drugs being brought into our community. I was talking with a family member who lost a loved one because their son got addicted to drugs. Illegal drugs that were brought in to our community through the 401, 403 corridor. They lost their son. They have real life consequences for their failures. Human trafficking, another huge part of crime that we're seeing in southwestern Ontario. Again, the minister responsible for public safety just puts his hands up and says, we're not going to, enforce the border. He was asked about hiring more CBSA officers. He said, it's not my job, because we know how Liberals do. They keep over-promising. They keep recycling the same photo ops. They keep announcing they're going to hire new personnel. But the minister, when asked how many did he hire so far, the answer was 0. They haven't hired any frontline officers.
Sorry, I was just checking.
When will you do it, or why haven't you done it? He put his hands up and said, it's not my responsibility. Well, whose responsibility is it? He's the minister responsible. He owes it to every single Canadian to do his job. But sadly, it is these Liberals that have broken our system. Canada's Conservatives will always stand for law-abiding Canadians, will invest in securing our borders, will ensure that repeat violent offenders that commit crimes are locked up, put behind bars, and will make sure we fix the broken immigration system so that all Canadians can achieve their full potential. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question on commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite did it all in terms of reflecting on the Conservative tough on crime policy and amplified the idea that Canada is broken. And I say to the member opposite that Canada is in fact not broken. And we continue to work with provinces to deal with issues like bail reform, because it is shared responsibility. But the question I have for the member opposite is very telling. He sits right behind the leader of the official opposition, and the leader of the official opposition did something despicable over the last week. When he called RCMP officers, and in particular the head of the RCMP, despicable. The RCMP is an institution that is recognized around the world as something positive. Does he believe that the leader of the Conservative Party should apologize?
A member for Oxford.
You should resign.
It is their policies that have destroyed almost every single aspect of our country today. It is their failures, it is their mismanagement, it is their negligence, it is their incompetence that has led to our country to be in the state we are today. And I'm proud to say my Jail Not Bail Act had the support of police officers, law enforcement from all levels, and I'm very excited that we're going to keep this conversation going, and we'll always stand with law enforcement on this side of the House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. Question and commentary. The honourable member for Calgary Crowfoot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So during my colleague's speech, he made reference to the tweet that resulted in the conflation of economic migrants and asylum seekers. And when he mentioned this tweet that single-handedly broke the asylum system, he was heckled by the Liberal benches. One of the members in the Liberal benches, in fact, called it the best tweet ever. So it would seem that this Liberal government has learned nothing, and it's certainly the members of its benches. But I thought I should bring it to this member's attention and see if he had any comments on that.
The honourable member for Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, it's this type of behavior that has caused the crisis we see today. That they're making policy on Twitter. They're making policy on a paper napkin. But it has real consequences for Canadians. And that 100,000 folks coming across our border put pressure on our system, has broken a system that was once the best in the world, that actually helped those that were being persecuted. But what do you get with these Liberals? They heckle, they mudsling, they try to distract, they try to deny, they try to obstruct. That is the Liberal way, and in the last 10 years, that's the way they've been doing it. But it will change under a Conservative government when that happens soon.
Questions and comments. Question and commentary. L'honorable député de Rivière-du-Nord.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for the speech. Earlier, I raised the problem of investment. There is insufficient staff to conduct business in airports, so I raised that. There is also an issue related to the enforcement of these provisions. Can my colleague share his views on what we should do to improve border security and safety? Does he feel that rather than passing bills upon bills, we should really get boots on the ground and make sure that things are working?
Honourable colleague for his great intervention. I think he raises a great point. This Liberal government is wasting over $700 million in a gun grab scam. That money should be put towards frontline officers at our borders with the RCMP. Put the money on the ground where the boots are going to be on the ground. Put it where we could actually enforce, where we could actually protect Canadians. The Liberals in the past have put money in bureaucracy. They've put money in nice office towers in Ottawa. That money should be put on the ground, on where people can actually do their job. We need more scanners. We need more CBC officers, frontline officers. We need more security. And again, they're heckling again, Mr. Speaker. They're heckling again because they can't handle the truth. It's their fault. We're going to fix it.
Resuming debate. Please to debate. The Honourable Secretary of State combating crime.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And recently, I just wanted to start by one of an experience I had. I went to the Canada Post mailing facility, and it was our government, or the Liberal government, I should say, in 2019 that was the first.
Okay, this is weird. The committee is showing as back in progress, but they're still suspended.
Resulting in many weapons, drugs being seized that are coming into our country through that postal center. And so, as we've done there, we've done at many ports as well, and we'll continue to invest in. And that's why I'm so happy to stand today.
Okay, there they are. They're back. About time.
Thomas for 5 minutes after that.
For 5 minutes, and we'll wrap up after that.
Ce qui me déçoit, madame, c'est que...
Well, what's unfortunate is that it's enough when you're saying 1 minute is enough. But, I'll take all the seconds you give me. We were just wrapping up, Ms. Bouchard, regarding the fact that we're in this huge battle. What I would call the digital literacy and also to try to get young people interested. And we're having to deal with these huge digital giants that will do whatever they want, but we want it to be more constructive and informative, but our goals are different. They just want to simply spread all kinds of random information that cannot be helpful. So in the last few seconds, how do you approach that cooperation with these foreign entities? Well, I think it's in the DNA of a public broadcaster, a public service, to think of all of society, to think about the various components of that strengthen society with all the agents of change that might come change things. That can be media, that can be the education system is what it is sometimes, from the primary school to university. The idea is to work with researchers to better understand what's happening, use the points of contact we have with our audiences to understand what's happening. So I think it's work that we'll do looking at all the tools we have within society. And we're not, I mean, we have control over a few things, but we can work so much better with so many more people. Thank you very much.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you. Ms. Bouchard, I asked earlier just with regards to LMIAs being acquired and temporary foreign workers being hired by the CBC. You said that that wasn't done under your watch. The last LMIA that was secured was in Q3 of 2024. So that would have been just a few months before you took over in January of 2025. What happened there then? Like if there's an LMIA that goes in, that person was never hired?
I'm sorry, what is this acronym that you're using? I'm not familiar with it.
An LMIA is an approval from the province to hire a temporary foreign worker for a position that the CBC has shown proof that they've looked for a Canadian worker to fill that position but haven't been able to find it.
Okay.
And so the CBC applied for an LMIA approval. They got it. And so that was in Q3 of 2024, just before your tenure started. Yes. And so that seems then to be on the books during your time as a CEO. But you said earlier that that didn't actually happen on your watch. So was this person hired and then fired only a few months later?
I have no information with respect to what you're citing, so I'd have to look it up.
Okay, but under your watch, starting in 2025, not a single temporary foreign worker currently works at the CBC or has since you took over.
That's the information I have, but I can double check.
Okay, and thank you. And you'll report that back to the committee, correct?
Sure.
Perfect. And then would you also commit to this committee, given rising unemployment numbers, that under your tenure as CEO, you would not hire any future temporary foreign workers to fill positions?
Well, honestly, we're in an environment where we are hiring the best talents we can. We are obviously hiring Canadians in a vast proportion. There might be incidents where, for a very specific type of work, there's a requirement. If there is a process and it's approved by the authority, I don't exactly see what the issue is that you have with this process, but maybe I'm not familiar enough.
I guess my issue is the fact that unemployment rates in Canada are rising, and the CBC is looking elsewhere to fill its talent rather than right here at home.
I don't think it's accurate to say that we're looking elsewhere. We're looking
with
extensively.
Respect,
sorry, if I can finish my answer.
The last LMIA was filed for hiring a business management consultant. I think there's quite a few of them in Canada.
Again, I'm not familiar with the example that you're citing, and I'd have to look it up. What I'm saying is that we are in constant interaction with universities and colleges, with job fairs, with our talent acquisition people work very hard to find talent, to train them, and we're very much involved in a Canadian workforce environment.
Thank you. I'll hand it over to my colleague, Mr. Dion.
Madam President, I just want to talk about media bias and balance again. Talked about on all sides organization rates media bias. So they rate The Atlantic, The Guardian, and Huffington Post as left of center, They rate Reuters, Christian Science Monitor, and Forbes as centrist, and they rate Fox News, National Review, and Epoch Times as right of center, which I think most people would agree is fairly accurate, correct?
Well, I mean, that's their rating.
Right. Okay. So in 2022, the same organization rated CBC as left of center. So what will you do to try to bring CBC to the center of the mix?
Well, again, we were talking earlier about the divide between urban and rural, and I think sometimes urban issues tend to be considered as potentially more center or more left, and rural issues sometimes considered more center or more right. I think having a wider span.
Yeah, just this organization per se didn't look at urban and rural. They looked at straight up bias, and they found that
I was getting
CBC is biased.
Well, you were asking me what will we do about it, and
right.
I was saying that redeploying in more locations in contact with more people in a diversity of contexts will improve our ability to accurately reflect the mood of the country and the various points of view. That's the plan.
Yeah. You know, when I've seen a lot of speeches by Pierre Poilievre in Alberta, and the biggest applause line by far is when he says, defund the CBC. Why do you think Albertans are so upset at the CBC that it needs to be defunded?
I don't know exactly what the people attending those meetings have in their heart. I've met with Albertans, some of them, obviously not everyone. I've had frank conversations about, what they feel is lacking in our coverage. I've also met people who feel that CBC is absolutely essential. So I think there's a diversity of feelings towards CBC. Can we do better? Always. We can always do better.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Diot. Ms. Royer, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to preface.
Okay, so this is the last Liberal round. I really don't want to listen to it, but we'll listen to it and then it's done. This is the last of the meeting.
Program called North by Northwest. It's a uniquely BC program, and it also sells books. They interview local authors, feature diverse content, Indigenous content, extraordinary interviews, and I know that many folks cite that program for purchasing their next book. So that's one. The next one is CBC Gem. There's a program that I love, and it's similar to the last title, but it's North by North, and it features a cast set in the fictitious Ice Cove in an Inuit village. And I really, really love the push and pull between the characters. It's a comedy. It's excellent writing, excellent cast. I think I binge watched some of the programs of that. I have a free CBC Gem account. So I guess I would fall into one of the 5.3 million in that category. But I also know that there's a lot of content that you don't even need a free account to watch, such as Hockey Night in Canada, Power and Politics. There's lots of stuff that CBC does. And I also want to highlight Radio Canada in the Metro Vancouver area. My husband is the municipal expert. He's a francophone. And I know that he is interviewed on subjects like transportation, emergency preparedness, housing, sort of regional issues that the French-speaking community might not otherwise hear in BC. So huge appreciation. CBC does a lot. Many countries give their public broadcasters predictable, multi-year funding, like the BBC's license fee or the per-household models in democratic France and Germany. Given the volatility of annual funding, can you describe how the CBC might benefit from a statutory per-capita model to strengthen its editorial independence and strategic planning?
That has been the one thing that has been lacking in our structure as a public broadcaster for decades and decades. And it is the predictability, the ability to invest, but invest in people, invest in the welfare of Canadians who we develop as journalists, as producers, as researchers, as creators of all kinds. The ability to partner in a reliable way. Because when we enter into relationships with community media, we promise something that sometimes we can't fulfill for a long-term view because we don't know if the funding is going to be there or not. So our stability and our ability to be the actor that is transformative for all of the media sector, all of the cultural sector. If I was just talking to independent producers, a show takes 3 years to develop. It costs an awful lot of money. We need partners in order to be able to leverage the creativity that is in Canada. If we were able to plan multi-year, we could shore up so many independent production firms that are really struggling. If we're talking about content for children, this is an area where independent production was historically extraordinary in Canada and has been depleted terribly to the point where the few that remains are struggling. If we could invest in a durable way and partnering with our other educational broadcaster partners, we could develop long-term views about how we finally accompany our children with content that is relevant to them, that is accessible to them, and durable. So it would make a huge difference, and this commitment would be transformative.
Amazing. I think we only have 20 seconds.
Oh, thank God.
30 seconds. Is there anything that you would like to share that maybe wasn't captured in a question, just in your closing remarks?
Despite the trials and tribulations and the difficulties, I think I'd like to share hope. There's a lot of promise in the public broadcaster.
Ms. Bouchard, we want to thank you again very much for your participation today and your fulsome answers. I think I've learned a lot. There's a lot of journalists around this table, so I think you got a lot of really probing questions, but we appreciate your time. Thank you for responding to our request for you to come.
Thank you very much.
With that, I will declare this meeting adjourned.
Okay. That is that. Typical Catherine Tate style CEO. We just cut the head of the snake and we got another one. That's the exact same. I think Tate was a little bit more condescending. This woman was a little bit more. She had a very broadcaster way of not answering the question, but answering a question with like a. I don't know. It's a hard way to dodging the question. Basically, is a good way to put it, but. Tate had ego. Yeah, exactly. Let me just double check. I know for a fact we're going to be live tomorrow at I think we're either doing 10 or 11 a.m. It might be 10 a.m. We're going to do public accounts because there's a few committees going on. We might start at 11, though, and instead do proc. I just want to really just dive in to see which one's going to be a bit more interesting. They're both going to be pretty good. So for sure we'll be live tomorrow morning for committee. Question period again at 2 p.m., and then we'll be live in the afternoon again for committee, probably the defense committee, either the justice or the defense committee, but there'll be two committees tomorrow, and we'll be live for question period. So lots to digest this week. And with that, we are done for today. I will see you guys tomorrow morning, and thanks again for sticking around this long and watching. And everybody have a good rest of your evening. Try to wash off the politics that we just digested all day. It was live for like 6.5 hours today, which was a lot. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, everyone, and cheers.